Hi everyone. If we can all gather together, we can start now. Okay. Well, thank you for those that joined us for the first session. It's good to see you again. And we are pleased to also welcome those joining us for the first time, both in person and remotely. We are pleased to have people joining us from all over, from Sydney, Nova Scotia, Champaign, Illinois, Houston, Connecticut, Kenloa, Lloydminster, Edmonton, and Vancouver. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. My name is Ola, and I'm a lawyer with Enanest. Before we begin, I would like to briefly tell you about who we are for those joining us for the first time. Enanest was founded in 2017 with a mission to help clients commercialize clean tech and new energy solutions. We combine expertise in climate regulation, emissions trading, and corporate law to deliver practical and strategic advice. Our low overhead structure allows us to support growing businesses efficiently and effectively. And the presenters today are John Gitz and Ashton Braham, who will be leading the presentation. John is a founder and partner at Enanest. He is one of Canada's leading clean tech and emissions trading lawyer, a trusted advisor, and serves on the board of several clean technology and energy companies. John has been practicing law and working with businesses for nearly 40 years. Ashton is a partner at Enanest, focused on clean technology. He advises clean tech and energy companies on corporate and commercial matters, including financing, commercialization, and growth. Ashton provides practical solutions-focused guidance to climate and sustainability-driven businesses. And a little bit about myself. I'm a dual qualified lawyer. I'm qualified to practice both in Nigeria and Canada. Before I moved to Canada, I was practicing in Nigeria and advising oil and gas companies on complex upstream projects and their commercial matters. At Enanest, I provide guidance on energy, clean tech, and commercial matters. Between the three of us, we have over 55 years of experience practicing law. And let me now briefly recap our last session and highlight what we'll be doing today and in our next two sessions. Like our last session, our overall theme is exploring the paths to market for clean technologies. Our last session focused on evaluating and selecting the most suitable monetization pathway for clean tech companies. We outlined the different approaches for commercialization and examine the strategic, operational, and financial factors that influence model selection. And today we will take a deeper look at direct sales and tech as a service model. We will examine how these structures operate in practice, including key contractual, operational, and revenue considerations, as well as the advantages and disadvantages for each model. Our next session will focus on licensing strategies, partnerships, joint ventures as pathways to scale and expand into new markets. We will explore how these structures allocate risk, protect intellectual property, and align commercial incentives, and when a partnership may be preferable to a joint venture. And our final session, which is the fourth in the series, turns to monetization of process outputs and carbon credits. We will discuss how companies can generate value from emissions, reductions, clean fuels, hydrogen, and other measurable outputs. We will also address ownership claim, rights, as well as risk of double counting and double selling. Before I hand over to John, I just wanted to briefly note for those of us attending in person that our tax are recyclables, and if you could please return them at the door at the end of the session, we really appreciate that. And also, for the women's washroom, is by the right, just at the elevator. There are 2 key cards at my right here at the door, and then at the left is the men's washroom. With that, I will hand over to John, who will take us on today's presentation. Thank you. Please welcome John Keats.
Thanks. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. I'm going to try and stand up, walk around a little bit today rather than just standing at the podium. We can go to the next slide. So today we're going to talk about a couple of different models within the direct customer pathway. The first one being basic equipment sales. And when we talk about equipment, we're talking about equipment that contains clean technology primarily, but literally you could apply it to any technology. How does it work? How does that process work? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of that? That one is pretty straightforward, but there are a lot of complexities that come into it depending on how you approach it. After we talk about that, we're going to talk about technology as a service model, which we'll call TaaS. How does that one work, and what are the advantages and disadvantages of that? We can go to the next slide. So selling equipment direct to a customer, basically starting with a one-time sale. This is really the most basic model. The issue with it is it does generate just one-time revenue, and that's not the worst thing, but it's not the best thing either. Although that literally, depending on your technology, that might be your best or your only option. So we'll take a look at it and look at it from a revenue and value perspective. We've got 2 columns here. One is commodity. The other one is a special product. By commodity product, we mean one that is been out there, or even if your technology is new, you're in an established marketplace with competitive technologies that do the okay. And so you're in what we'd call a commoditized market, and you're going to be limited as to what you can charge for your equipment or your technology depending on how it performs vis-a-vis other available technologies out there. So these are not the same products on either market. The special product is a product where you've got some IP protection for it, i.e. it's rare, it's not easily available or replaceable outside of what you're able to offer the marketplace. And so in the commodity product situation, your typical pricing is, let's say you're selling your unit for $10,000. You've got a 40% gross margin is your average margin in a situation like this. It could be a little higher, it could be a little lower, but it's in that range. And so you're making a $4,000 gross profit on every unit that you sell. That's not bad, but obviously you're going to have to sell a lot of units at that price. And again, that's what happens if you have a product that's okay and not great. That's life. That's where you're at. You've got competitors. If you have a special product that has attributes to it, A, that are protected, and B, that enhance performance or save money on the customer side, and we'll talk about a few of those today, then you have an opportunity to price your product not based on the cost of producing that product, which could be pretty low, could be pretty high, but you've got an opportunity to base the price of your product on the value that it brings the customer. So let's say in this case, we've got a product that costs us $2,000 to build. But because of the value of that product and because of the benefit it brings to the customer and potentially the cost savings or the improved performance and improved revenues or profits that the customer is going to enjoy by using the product, we are able to sell it for a $10,000 price. So 80% profit margin, much bigger. You only have to sell half the units that you were selling on the other side for $10,000 to make twice the profit. So that just gives you a bit of a context for if you're in a one-time sale environment, it can be okay, or it can be pretty good. So we don't want to be slagging one-time sales, but you'll see that there's probably a propensity to use a different model that we'll talk about shortly. So your margins can basically be significantly higher if you've got protected technology and products. You can price your product according to the value that it brings. Next slide. So some of the challenges, or one of the challenges you might have, the biggest one we typically come across when you're selling a technology or a piece of equipment or a system to a customer, is that you are expecting them to pay upfront and then you'll deliver the equipment, and that's the way it works. Unfortunately, especially in the oil patch, there's been many times where companies are cutting their capital budgets significantly, and they're not interested in making purchases that require significant capital outlay. And so you're kind of up against it. It's kind of thanks, but no thanks. First thing when you walk in the door to make the sale. So a couple of solutions you might have is, okay, so they don't want to spend CapEx on this. Can we finance this purchase for them, or can we lease them the unit so that they can pay for it out of operating expenses as opposed to a capital outlay? That will often be seen as more attractive. They can amortize the cost of the unit over years as opposed to paying for it up front. But there's challenges to that. Okay, so how do we set up this financing situation? So you could set up an internal financing arm, which for early stage companies can be difficult because it requires capital that you probably don't have. You're in the business of selling your equipment to make money. You're not in the business of, here's your equipment, by the way, we're going to pay, we're going to get it financed for you up front and so on. That would all take your capital. So if you're able to do it, it can produce additional returns on the capital that you're investing on the financing or the leasing side. Or if you can't, maybe you can provide a service contract to the lease or to the sale if you're not using a lease. So an example that I'll sort of illustrate this with is we had a client that developed a very effective methane emission reduction technology. Basically, they replaced pneumatic pumps with solar-powered chemical injection pumps. And as everyone here is probably aware, one of the top sources of greenhouse gases in Alberta with the oil patch is methane. And it's a big concern. Methane's a huge contributor. It's a very dense greenhouse gas. And so to have a solution to that is a big deal. And they did have a solution, but they were an early stage company, and they ran into we don't want to outlay capital to buy this equipment. It's not critical at this time. We're not being forced by regulations to buy it. Yeah, we feel bad about emitting methane, but the pressure wasn't really strong enough to get them to move. And so they had to figure out some sort of a solution to that knockout objection. And so they were really having difficulty selling on that basis, so they got a few units in, and they ran those units, they tested those units, the units performed, they were able to measure the emission reductions, and they were able to get them quantified and verified. And so they did a great job of that, because if they hadn't gone the data route and gotten good data and had it verified, they would have had a problem. Then they said, okay, well, so now what do we do? So we had a conversation in the early days and said, let's see if we can figure out a financing platform based on carbon credits. And so we went to one of the banks here and we said, listen, we know that we have equipment that reduces methane based on our initial results. We're getting these types of volumes of emission reductions. We know that carbon's in this value range. At this time, it was at $15 a ton, was a regulated price. And so we're able to project what our carbon credit revenues are going to be. Will you fund us on our equipment? And the bank said, well, okay, this sounds interesting. We haven't done this before, but tell you what, we'll give you a few bucks and you go out there and grow this a little bit, and we'll see how that works, and then if it works, we'll look at expanding the program. Well, sure enough, we went out the next year, it did work well. We also had to have the carbon credits sold and show them the money, and we were able to show them the money. So from that point on, they said, yep, 70% lender financing. The only issue was that still meant our client had to come up with the other 30%, and that was going to be a problem at scale as well. So they said, okay, well, the next step is let's figure out a program with producers where they don't have to put upfront capital in. Our program was to say, hey, listen, we're going to pay for this equipment, we're going to install it, and the condition is that we own the carbon credits that it generates. And once we've paid out our capital and our expenses of doing this, then we'll start to share the carbon credit revenue with you. And so they kind of went, so, well, where's our risk? Which is the question that we wanted them to ask, because we more or less removed their risk. So we started doing that and signing on producers, and it grew and it grew and it grew, and it grew really well. The biggest challenge was, again, filling that 30%, but because the program was doing well, they were able to find other funders to look after getting that 30%, and off they went, and they exited. Well, this is iteration 2. Iteration 1 didn't work, ran out of money. So iteration 2, new group, it worked really well. They reduced millions of tons of emissions. They generated millions of dollars in carbon credits, and lo and behold, they got taken out by a UK-based multinational, and we're still working with that group now. But it's a good success story. It wasn't easy, as I said. They had to take 2 kicks at the cat, but when they succeeded, it worked out well. So that's kind of a bit of a unique alternative solution to internal financing. It was pretty creative. We've been able to use that kind of a system with other clients and projects to get them going as well. Next slide. So failing something that creative, you can try and set up third-party financing arrangements where basically, I like the easiest example is a car lot. Okay, you go and you buy the car. You can't afford to pay for it in cash, so they say, well, we want to lubricate the situation and make sure we get the sale. So they have a financial arm. Either it's right within their thing and it's internal, but most times it's third party, especially used cars. They don't have the capital to be financing their sales, but they have it set up, and so you can sign into it easily, and it may not make you extra money, but it does allow you to get the sale, or it lubricates the ability to get the sale and reduces the friction in the transaction. So if you're able to set up a third-party arrangement, it doesn't give you extra revenues, it doesn't give you ongoing revenues, but it does help you make the initial sale. Next slide. All right. So the advantages of the straight equipment sale model, and basically when we say that we're talking about a one-time sale of equipment, is it is the simplest model, and it might be best for testing the market. And the story I just told you sort of talks about the fact that they had to test the market first, make sure that the thing performed, and they had to make a few sales at the beginning to early adopters to make that work. So it can be a start and a springboard to maybe be able to use a different sales model. It helps if the product is priced to match the value, but that can be challenging too. I talked about, I'll save that example, but basically, if you've got a product that costs $2,000 to build and you're selling it for $50,000, and the procurement officer at one of the large oil companies knows how much it costs roughly to make this thing, they don't care if it saves them millions. They are going to tell you to hit the pavement. And I have people in this room who can vouch for that personally. And it's really weird because, it's not good math, but those procurement people are there to do a job, and they're really good at it. They're pretty cutthroat, and you're not going to get, what they would consider to be the upper hand on them. And trying to get it up the chain and say, hey, do you know what your procurement guy did? He just lost you guys a bunch of money. Have fun. It's not an easy thing to do. So that, getting value priced can work, but it's often not easy to do. Depending on the nature of the equipment and the potential opportunities for a servicing contract, the way that, if the equipment requires servicing, you may be able to sell the equipment and then get them to sign on to a servicing contract. And we'll talk about an example of that in a bit. Disadvantages, unless you can internally finance or lease, you're limited to your revenue from the sale and your profitability after the initial sale. You've got a weak recurring revenue profile, which investors don't really like. Investors these days like to see a recurring revenue stream that isn't just based on sell. You have limited customer lock-in, i.e. relationship with the customer, because you only really have the one touch point with them, which is when you're selling your equipment or your technology. And it's hard to build a large-term value stack if it's sort of a sold and done transaction. So those are kind of the disadvantages, and we'll now contrast that with the next model. If you could go to the next slide. So model 2, which is a little more fun and a little more interesting, selling technology as a service. So basically, other than selling a piece of equipment, you're offering it as a service solution. So you're not selling equipment, you're selling a solution, and you're selling them an outcome, really. So in this case, typically you're going to maintain ownership of the equipment or the technology. You're probably going to operate, well, you or a contractor of yours is going to operate the equipment on a monthly or quarterly fee basis for a service fee or a processing fee. And you're going to have the best part of this, which is an ongoing revenue stream. So that's all great if it works. But again, there's an example that I told on the last seminar that we did a few weeks ago, that smart, large buyers know full well that they're better off in situations laying out their capital rather than signing on to a processing contract, right? Because a processing contract means you're going to be making money, you're going to be making a toll off that service for years to come, and it could be a big multiple of what it would cost them to actually, just lay out the capital and buy the project. The example I used last week, and the gentleman is sitting in this room, was involved in this project, but there was a fantastic water treatment technology that was getting used in the oil sands, and the company was not in great financial shape, but it really had exciting technology that worked. These units are still processing water in the oil sands right now, but because of the company's weak financial position, they could not convince the buyers to do a technology as a service contract. They basically said, no, we'll either buy your equipment or we'll buy your public company out and we'll own everything. So that was the way it worked. They just couldn't get that technology as a service model to work. Maybe if they'd have had the longevity and the wherewithal over time, they could have gotten it there, but they just weren't able to get it there. So getting an ongoing revenue stream, the point of that story is it's not always as easy as you might think it is. I'm going to flip to our video on the next slide, if we could.
Climate change. Its impacts seem more apparent
So
by
there's
the
about 3
day.
minutes.
What can building owners do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? Most have already transitioned to LED lighting and installed smart systems to maximize efficient energy use. But buildings still produce greenhouse gas emissions, contributing about 20% of the emissions in Canada, 12% in the US, and 7% worldwide. So what's next? Clean02 has developed a revolutionary technology that captures the greenhouse gas carbon dioxide, or CO2, from building heating appliances before it enters the atmosphere. Introducing CarbonX. Installed in a building's mechanical room, CarbonX captures carbon dioxide emissions from the flues of natural gas-fueled water heaters and boilers. Inside CarbonX, the carbon dioxide is converted into potassium carbonate, also called pearl ash. We use this chemical in the production of our innovative range of soaps and cleaning products. Because the carbon dioxide is converted into a carbonate, it is never released to the atmosphere, even after the products are used. One single Carbon X unit can sequester between 6 to 8 tons of carbon dioxide per year. That's the equivalent of 300 trees. So how does all this work? First, the building owner buys a Carbon X unit. The unit, which is roughly the size of 2 refrigerators, is installed by approved technicians. Once installed, it is charged with a chemical reactant. The Carbon X is switched on and starts capturing carbon. It's that simple. What's more, Carbon X actually saves you energy and money in the process. The reaction that creates pearl ash also produces heat. This is combined with the waste heat from the flue gas. There's enough heat to warm cold water before it enters the building's boiler, reducing your natural gas consumption by up to 20%. When Carbon X requires attention to remove the pearl ash, it lets us know, and our technicians harvest the pearl ash and recharge the reactant. No owner involvement required. While our trained technicians are there, they do a visual inspection of your other HVAC appliances to ensure there are no problems developing. If there are, we report back before the problems become a larger, more expensive situation. Last, our technicians deliver the pearl ash to our facilities, where it's put to good use in the production of great soaps and cleaning products. But there's more innovation here. It's in our business model. The sale of our soap and cleaning products helps offset Clean02's cost of Carbon X research, development, and deployment, allowing us to install more units all over the world. And Clean02 shares the revenues from its products with the building owner, or alternatively, provides them with soap and cleaning products to use in their buildings. Now that Clean02 has removed the barriers to installing Carbon X, there's nothing keeping you from further reducing your building's carbon footprint. In fact, you have plenty of good reasons to do it now.
Thanks very much. Go to the next slide for a second. I'll just see if I want to go to that one or no. So we'll go to the previous slide before that video, if that's okay. So the reason I showed that example of that video, and sorry if it was a little longer than it needed to be, I don't have the ability to edit. So you got the full 3.5-minute sales pitch. But the reason I showed that example is because it actually shows, you know, pretty much all 3 models, or the potential for all 3 models, and the sort of the variations that you can have on each model. So Clean02, our client, decided that they would start by selling the unit, and then these units have to be serviced. So they get charged with a potassium hydroxide, and then they run the flue gas from the heating appliance in the building through it, and it produces a potassium carbonate, because that's the hydroxide gets converted into carbonate, and that's what captures the carbon. And so their model was, well, we'll sell the unit, and then we'll do the servicing for free, because we can then turn around and sell our carbonate or make soap out of it and make enough money doing that that we can afford to service the units ourselves. So that was their initial model. Didn't quite work that way. They found over time that because they couldn't get to scale quickly enough, they weren't able to produce enough carbonate in commercial volumes that they could easily sell it. They went down the path of producing soap and car wash detergent, a few other things. The soap was really, really good. But at the end of the day, they just found it wasn't economical. They couldn't get to the volumes that they needed to make it profitable. So they still use their carbonate to make soap, but they have a third party making the soap, and you can still buy the soap at Co-op. It's under a Cal and Gary brand. So it was a lot of fun to work with them on all that stuff. But at the end of the day, now they pivoted to a model where they sell the unit, but then they ask the customer to enter into a servicing contract so that they will then service the unit, charge it, discharge it, etc. Some of the customers are saying, yeah, we'll do that. And so it's great because it's relieved that friction of having to be able to pay your service people and not have revenue sufficient to pay them with. So they're getting paid for the servicing now. But some of them say, no, we don't want, we'll just get the unit in there. We'll use it as an economizer. We'll reduce our fuel consumption, which it does, even if you don't stock it with potassium oxide, and that's good enough for us. So that's in the early stages, and they'll see how that goes. But I use it to sort of illustrate, the coolness of the circular economy of that technology, but also that at the end of the day, if this second model works, they'll probably go to the third model once they're more established. As I mentioned on the last seminar, they are about to enter into a joint venture with a large utility. And once they have a large utility behind them, then financing is more easily solved, and they'll have a lot more flexibility to then do straight technology as a service model, so not have to worry about the complexities of servicing. And the complexities of servicing is something we'll talk about in a moment. So we can skip a couple slides now. Okay, so next example, I'm going to be running short on time here, so I'll kind of zip through this one. How am I doing for time? 13 minutes? Okay, great. That should be lots. So this was a client we had that had an industrial carbon capture technology that was extremely exciting. It was a pretty complex technology that has a lot of patent protection and a lot of trade secrets, which is kind of a nice blend of the two types of IP protection. The technology, when it's operated to capture carbon, it generates a valuable byproduct. The byproduct can be used in things like batteries, power production units, cosmetics, medical devices, etc. It's basically an engineered carbon that has a lot of uses. The byproduct, the way we structured their contracts, is that the company maintains the ownership of the byproduct. They're doing a carbon capture as a service model because they don't really have a choice. The customer can't really operate these units without the technology company's involvement. So oftentimes the technology will dictate which model that you're able to take advantage of here, and in this case it was technology as a service. And there wasn't a lot. It's still early stages. They have yet to. They've done a pilot unit on a coal-fired generating plant, but they don't have any commercial units in the field yet. So we'll see how it goes when and if they get to that stage. But in this case, it's another case where the value of the technology and the byproducts far outweigh the cost of the equipment, but because the technology is so well protected, and if they can prove that it works at a commercial scale, they'll probably be able to command a high price for the services. Next slide. So advantages of the technology as a service is that recurring revenue, which again, investors like to see, but frankly, if I'm a technology company owner, I like to see that too. I don't want to have to wake up every morning and think about who am I going to sell my product to next. I'd rather say, well, I've got all this recurring revenue from all those customers I've already sold to, generating revenue for me every month. So there's potentially less customer adoption friction because you've taken away the upfront capital expense. So you've reduced or eliminated that if you have a technology as a service model. The vendor maintains control of the operations of the technology, which can be important if it's IP, because if you're operating the technology, there's less chance of reverse engineering. I don't know that reverse engineering, well, I won't even say that. I was going to say I don't know that it happens that much in North America, but it does. But it's really important in other countries. And performance data, you own that performance data. You may license the technology user to let them use it for certain purposes, but you own it, and it can also be valuable not just to yourself, but for other purposes. And then you have an ongoing customer relationship. So once you have a customer like that, and you're in the industry, if you have improvements or new technologies, et cetera, you have a kind of a customer for life, and the relationship is always fresh because your people are in their operations on a daily or a weekly basis or whatever it might be. So there's no real replacement for that. In this case, the technology company gets to capture the byproduct value and the carbon credits, the environmental attributes that came from it, and it gives the two parties a bit of a stronger alignment, because the better the unit or the technology performs, the happier the customer is, but the more money that the technology owner is also making. So there's a little stronger alignment there. Next slide. Disadvantages, more operational complexity, and this is in bold often underestimated because we have worked with several early stage companies that said, oh yeah, we can do all this, and then they start to run into issues that they hadn't anticipated. And a lot of it is lack of experience, and it's the old what can go wrong will go wrong. But an example of in Clean 02 situation, we had HVAC contractors in different cities around the country and down in the US as well. And we thought that's easy enough. We're paying them well, and they'll go service the units every 2 weeks or whatever the cadence was for that unit. And guess what? They didn't. Well, you're getting paid. Like, well, why aren't you doing that? But it doesn't. The reason doesn't matter. They just weren't doing it. And if they did do it, they're doing a lousy job. They weren't collecting the data. All sorts of problems. So that was just an example of one of the million things that can go wrong when you're doing the sales as a service pathway, as opposed to here's the unit. You're off on your own. Have fun. There's also a lot of service capability and logistics. That was the example I just gave, but logistics of moving stuff around, getting people and technology, et cetera, and inputs and outputs into the right places at the right time is daunting, and it's often a much bigger task. It slows down scaling if you don't have a service footprint that has a critical mass there. So for Clean 02, our service footprint was 10 units in a city, and then we could afford to have a service personnel there. But if you only had 2, that meant you couldn't service that equipment. And we had units at the very outset, all over North America. We had them in New York and California, et cetera. And we hired contractors, but again, that wasn't smooth sailing. In some cases, it wasn't bad, but in a lot of cases, it wasn't. And then the payback is slower than on a straight equipment sale, which obviously makes sense. If I'm selling you a piece of equipment, same as I sell you a car, you're paying me on the spot, and I go to the next one. With technology as a service, you have to have the capital to build the unit and get it installed, and then you're getting your service fee back over time, which means you're going to have some sort of financing to allow you to do that. So that can be a major disadvantage, and it can actually and does often make this option not available for early stage companies. They can grow into it though, which would be recommended if it's doable, but you need to be well funded, and you need to have a good administration team and a well-run outfit to make this successful. Next slide. So this is just sort of getting back to the big picture now on just direct-to-customer execution in the first place. There's a lot of requirements that you have to have in place to make it work. Direct-to-customer means you're managing almost everything, and that's why when we talked on our last session about licensing, joint ventures, partnerships, versus direct-to-customer, we were sort of saying it can be a lot easier to joint venture or do a license and then let the people who are good at it and established do all of this stuff, because you're looking at R&D, manufacturing and procurement. Do you do that in-house or contract? Finance, human resources, that is a major one. People, in our experience, and we've had enough of them to almost be able to say this as Bible, but people are basically, it doesn't matter how good your technology is. If you don't have the people, it's not going to happen. And I don't think we've seen an exception to that rule unless they got out early and licensed. But if they touch execution, half the inventors, it's not good. Service and logistics, that's complex. You need experts to do that. Product sales and marketing, you got in-house sales staff, you got third-party distributors, been there, done it all. It's really, really tough. And you think, oh, great, well, we just got this product into Canadian Tire. Wow, well, we don't have anyone servicing Canadian Tire. There's no marketing demonstrations or anything going on. And guess what? The product, as great as it is, doesn't sell. There's just so much more to it. Oh, we just got the biggest distributor in Canada. wow, better do a press announcement. Total dud. Like, that's one of a million products we're distributing. Thanks very much. You know, there was actually a bit of involved in selling your product, so we just didn't bother selling any. And that's the kind of stuff that you're up against when you look to try and do it all yourself. It's a tough row to hoe. Next. Okay, so conclusions. Direct to customer, we said this last session, it's the most difficult for the reasons that we said. It's also the most capital intensive because it's all your capital. You don't have a partner. It's the highest risk because, frankly, there's always a shortage of capital and there's always a shortage of qualified manpower, and you don't need any other shortages. If you have those two, you're done. So lowest likelihood of success. Potentially the highest reward if you do succeed, which is what keeps so many entrepreneurs, you know, motivated. They don't want to quit. They want to be the one who succeeds, and I don't blame them. I've been there, done that. It gives you the most control and independence. You don't have people other than maybe your venture capital guys telling you what you can and can't do. You're not being dictated to by your partner, and you don't have a licensee telling you that you don't know what you're doing, so just back off and leave them alone. And it also has potentially the highest satisfaction because if you do succeed, it's an awfully good feeling. But the flip side of that is, guess what? Potentially the highest dissatisfaction, including bankruptcy and insolvency, which isn't a lot of fun. So I'm being a little facetious, but those are things that come with direct to customer pathways and trying to do everything yourself. Next slide. That's it for me. I'm going to turn it over to Ashton, and he's going to entertain you with something that's even a little bit more interesting in my view than what I got to speak about.
Thanks, Sean. So I'm just going to build upon and delve into a little bit deeper when it comes to the technology as a service model on something John's mentioned, where with that model, you're going to have larger upfront costs from the company as well as ongoing operational costs. Your operational costs, those are of course going to be covered by your service agreement, but in order to get there, you need to get that contract online, which means you need money. And one of the things we've been seeing, I'd say growing in popularity over recent years, is people chasing after what I call a project special purpose vehicle angle, which really is you're taking a specific project or a bundle of projects that have identifiable assets, identifiable revenues, and having them be a standalone financeable asset. And so as we move into the next slide, I'm just going to run over why clean tech companies are kind of chasing after that these days. And so the main reason really is that it's going to open up more financing options. So instead of relying on the strength of the company itself, and that you'll be looking more to the specific story behind the project, the assets, and the revenues that are coming from it. And what this can mean is it can open up a variety of different financing options that might not otherwise be available to you. This could be blended debt and equity, peer equity, grant funding, things of that nature. And one of the big benefits there that I think is attracting clean tech companies is by having all of that happening down low, not at the mothership level, you're really avoiding a lot of dilution that could otherwise be happening up there and saving more pie for the early investors and founders. Another reason people might consider this angle or going after is it can ring fence the project from the company's balance sheet. And the main reason you might want to do this is just to leave open more possibilities at that mothership level to pursue other equity and debt financing options. Because if you go down that project specific level, which I'll briefly touch on in a bit, you're going to have more financial covenants, things that are restricting you and how you can move the cash around. And you can kind of avoid that by keeping that contained down at that lower level. Also, you can sometimes reduce recourse up to that mothership level or liability. So if things happen to go south in the project, the mothership might not be exposed. Realistically though, if you're in the early stages, you've only done it 1, 2, 3 times, you're probably not going to get away with that with your funder. But after you've kind of developed that relationship and you're able to prove that, hey, we've done this before, you kind of have that negotiating power to then push back and isolate the mothership in case something does happen to go wrong. And then lastly, and this is really in circumstances where it fits, it doesn't always fit, but sometimes you can set yourself up for partial exits where one of your special purpose vehicles, you can then go and sell that while retaining everything else that the company is doing and have a little bit of an exit there. That said, as we go into the next slide, I'll cover why it's often more difficult than people expect it's going to be. People go in with rose-colored glasses and they think, hey, this is great. We're going to get this upfront financing. We're going to have this reoccurring revenue. It's all going to be at this project level. But the reality is it's a lot more complex and expensive to structure than relative to just doing a straight equity financing at the mother level. You're not just raising money for the company. You're kind of building a whole separate project vehicle with a full financing and contractual architecture around it. And often that can mean you're sort of starting at ground zero for that project SPV. You'll have things that you can adopt from the mothership level, but there is going to be a fair bit of work there that you're going to need to do. As well, the expectation from the funder versus if you were to do things just, let's say, a straight equity financing at the mothership level, is that your contractual package is going to need to be a lot stronger. It's also going to need to be very understandable for the funder. So things like your service agreement, how risks allocated, your construction arrangements, your operating arrangements, and even like the rights you have to the specific site are all going to be very crucial. And if that stuff isn't sufficiently developed, or even if it's just confusing, you're going to have a hard time securing that financing. Also, it's going to take you longer to complete, and it's going to be more expensive. You're going to have to go through that contracting process with a bunch of different parties, your construction, your customer, you name it. And then some funder's going to come along, they're going to closely scrutinize all of that, as well as dealing with all of the project-specific issues that are going to pop up along the way. And then once you finally get things in place, it's ultimately usually going to end up leading to having less flexibility at that project level. As I mentioned, you're going to be under tighter covenants probably from your funder. They're going to be restricting how cash is moving around, how it's being used, and then there's going to be a lot less flexibility to go back after you've spent all that time getting things in place to change something after the fact. And then for early on companies, John kind of mentioned this, where it's going to be difficult to do, but you can sort of ease into it. But if you're at the stage where your technology really isn't fully proven yet, or if it's a first of a kind, or you just don't have sufficiently predictable revenues or some type of model that you can point to that you've already done to a funder, you're going to have a hard time getting them comfortable with financing the project on a standalone basis. And in those cases, what's common is you'll see companies try to kind of ease into it then. One good example we have with one of our clients who's done well with this is SolarSteam, who has a technology that, to put very simply, uses the sun's energy to heat up any type of liquid. And what they found during the process is that their customers really weren't interested in owning and operating the solar thermal energy equipment. And instead, they were just interested in getting the heat, lowering their emissions, as well as reducing their exposure to energy volatility. And so what SolarSteam ended up doing is they decided we're going to build the technology, we're going to finance it, we're going to commission and operate the projects, and then we're just going to sell the heat under a long-term service arrangement. And they've been successful in getting initial funding for a first-of-a-kind project, in part with the help from Taylor, who's in the audience today, with a significant amount of grant funding, and then as well as some of the mothership equity, to kind of pursue a first-of-a-kind project where they are using that energy as a service model. And then that will kind of form the basis or the proof of concept, and they'll then go out to funders for future projects in order to kind of get that debt financing and not have to worry about things at the mothership level. Another way you can kind of get around it is if you're in a space that's easy to understand or that's already quite familiar, and you have very strong credit-worthy customer would be the case. So if you think about your traditional solar projects, for example, that people have been doing for a long time, funders are comfortable with that. If you have a strong counterparty that whoever the funder is knows going to be there to pay, you're kind of going to get around that issue as well. And then going into the last slide here, I guess I just wanted to cover maybe a few of the key lessons that we've seen over the years. One of which would be that standardization and familiarity are really your key drivers. If you're going in trying to reinvent the wheel substantially, things are confusing, the funder's like, what's going on here? You're going to have a hard time getting your financing. And similarly along that vein, your commercial terms really do matter. It's just as much as the technological merit, I would say. If your technology alone is probably not going to be good enough. If you're expecting that to be the case, you're gonna be disappointed, as bankability is going to depend on whether you have all the sufficient contract terms in place that the funder's expecting, as well as that the risk's appropriately allocated. And so they're going to scrutinize things like payment terms, like delivery schedule. They're going to look at things like counterparty risk, marketing risk, execution risk on your end. And you're going to need to expect to get them comfortable on every single one of those fronts. Another lesson we've learned is that the project has to remain competitive against alternatives. And so if your commercial offering is worse than whatever the leading alternative is, the funder is going to look at that and they're going to see risk there because they're going to think there's a possibility that whoever your customer is, there's somewhere along the way they're going to want to switch back over to the other alternative. And so at the end of the day, the project has to make sense for all of the people involved, not just the technology company. They're also going to look at your internal execution capabilities. Not only your team, but who your external contractors are. And we've seen clients, for example, where they've put out quotes to construction companies and they received a very high one from a well-known reputable construction company and a bunch of other quotes from local contractors that were far more palatable. And despite that being more palatable, they ended up going with the big name just because they wanted to give that comfort to the lender of like, hey, we got so-and-so that's going to be handling our construction. Don't worry about it. You can trust them type of thing. And then another would be a common misconception that we've seen a few times now is where companies will think that their project assets are going to be, a lot of value is going to be attributed to them by the funder. And we've seen a lot of people be very disappointed to learn that that's not the case. One example fairly recently is we had a client that had a pyrolysis project that they were pursuing in Saskatchewan. And they were going out seeking debt funding for it. And time and time again, what the story they ended up hearing is, hey, if we have to go and resell this technology, there realistically isn't that many people that are going to want to buy it. And even though it was located about an hour or less outside of Regina, they also pointed to that specific location being this geography is also going to make it really harder to sell this project. And at the end of the day, they attributed essentially negligible value to substantial amount of assets on that. And so you really should be expecting that you're going to need to secure that funding off the back of your service agreement and the reoccurring revenues from it. And then the last kind of note I'll leave you with that I've kind of already harped on a little bit is weak counterparties will hurt you, especially your customer. The stronger your customer counterparty is, where the funder can look at it and be like, oh, this is some government entity where we're very confident that they're going to be paying, versus some startup that we've never even heard of these guys. The funder is going to be a lot more reluctant to provide you with funds on that basis. And so I guess the key takeaway from all of that would be project SPV financing can be an attractive tool, but only if the project itself and the contracts can support it. And so with that, I'll turn the floor back over to John for any questions and to wrap things up. Yep.
Stand up here for the questions. But next slide, if we could. So I just want to thank everyone here for joining us, and also thank our people who joined us online. It's great to have you. We had, I think, Hola mentioned people from all over North America plugging in on this or registering for it at any rate. So it was nice to see. We have a couple of questions. If you were to point your camera to that QR code there, it'll give you the questions. If you wouldn't mind at some point before you leave doing that and answering the questions, we'd appreciate it. It helps us make our sessions better for you. So I'll give you a second to do that if you're so inclined. I'm going to try it myself, just make sure it works. Amber says it works, but I haven't tried it. It works? Okay.
And I haven't seen the questions, but if possible, like the upcoming sessions on JV's licensing. So if there's anything you want us to specifically discuss during that session, and there's a way for you to tell us during this, do so.
Yeah, that would. Did everyone hear Ashton, or should I repeat that? Yeah? So, okay, so the next session is licensing joint ventures and partnerships. So if that's something that you're considering or want to know more about and have some specific questions, all the better to answer this poll. Next. So our next session is licensing joint ventures. Partnerships is mixed in there, so same strategies, opportunities, risks. We'll be telling some, again, real-life stories as opposed to just spoon-feeding you concepts. We'll we like to show you how they actually can apply in real life, and it seems to help them hit home a little bit better. And it's also more interesting. So we're going to explore two often related pathways for tech companies to bring their innovations to market. That basically licensing structures and joint ventures and partnership structures. We like to say joint ventures and partnerships are very similar in effect. They're just structured differently legally. So that's Thursday, May 21st. We even have a QR code scan to register there. I'd love to take credit, but these are all Crin's marketing secrets that they're giving us the benefit of. So definitely scan to register, or make sure that you do register early. And we're going to be examining IP requirements for licensing and joint venture partnerships. Licensing is not an option to everybody if you don't have your sufficient IP to license out. Different licensing structures. There's quite a few options in that regard. Joint venture and partnership structures, challenges, advantages, disadvantages, all the same stuff. And importantly, capital requirements are very different from what we just talked to you about today. So thanks, everybody. And with that, I think, is there one more slide?
Question and answers.
Oh, of course, questions and answers. I'm not off the hook yet. We'll do that, and then I'll turn it over to Crin. So anybody have any questions that they would like answered? Speak up. Last time we had some really good questions and quite a few of them, and it was kind of fun. But you don't always get that lucky. So, okay, we have a question.
First of all, thank you for the presentation. Really good job. I really appreciated this week as well as the last session. So this is exactly where we're at. We have clean tech that we're selling into different mines, and we have a current, I've always just sold the product as we're testing it, and now we see that we have a whole bunch of different avenues, and you nailed it there. You scared the crap out of me last time, though, when you talked about that company who got bought or where the mine offered to, instead of paying them their service for the years going forward, just simply, purchase them out. And so that's kind of where we're at, where, a lot of, yes, our customers hold the big end of the stick because they've given us a sandbox in which we prove the technology, and they are the greatest beneficiary of the technology once deployed. And we do have those procurement people who look at the product and say, well, when you add all these parts together, they don't add up to the sum of the value, even though it's return on investment in only a couple days. So, how do you suggest balancing that? Like I just skip those people, right? Like I'll move to the next mine, and I'll say, well, too bad. Like you guys, if you're not able to be a collaborator, or this is sort of how you approach things, we don't want to do business with you. And I mean, how dangerous, like it's, when I heard that, like that could be us, dead before we go, or our trajectory is this. And the difference is that customer, is that willingness to work with a small company, to come up with the right pricing plan, right?
Yeah.
So, what's your biggest advice to not,
Are you a private company or a public company?
Private.
Private. So that's good because it gives you the say as to whether or not you want to sell your company or not. As a public company, they didn't have that. They didn't have that say, and so they were exposed, especially early stage public. I just don't recommend going public if you're an early stage company, period. If somebody sells you on, we'll take you public, run for the hills, or come talk to me, or Ashton, or one of us, Ola. It's a terrible thing to do as an early stage company. But as a private company, your best strategy is you need more than one party at the table. The more parties you have at the table interested in your technology, the more leverage and power you have in the negotiations. And if they know that you're all tied up with them, you just won't get a good deal. And the procurement people they're really good. I mean, they're paid a lot of money, and they're worth it because they save the company, millions and millions of dollars. So there's a bit of an inequity in negotiating experience a lot of the time too, if you're an early stage company and you haven't negotiated stuff like that. So don't put all your eggs in one basket. I know Kyle's probably grinning right now because, we at the water treatment company ran pilots for companies and we get great results and just assume that, there's going to be a sale at the end of this. No sale. They're kind of using you. They're just trying to get industry and technology intelligence. And then, frankly, a lot of them will try to go off and do it themselves. Yeah. So that's a real risk. But that's why it's good to have more than one party at the table, so you're not stuck with one. The other thing to be sure of is when you are doing a pilot, before you start the pilot, have an agreement in place that sets out the parameters for the pilot and the definition of success and some sort of language. It's hard to get at the beginning that says, if we meet these parameters, you will buy or contract with us. Because again, a lot of these companies are just trying to pick up intelligence at your expense, and they'll pay you for the pilot, but that's covering your costs. You're not making any money doing that, and you get into a situation where you've devoted a ton of time and resources to a pilot. You do get the benefit of proving that it works, but that may be it, and you might be broke by the end of it, right? So that's the risk. You really have to watch out on entering and starting pilots if you don't have a good agreement in place. And oftentimes you'll get promised the moon, but when you do get down to doing the agreement, what we didn't say that, right? So you're back to square one when you put paper in front of them. So you really have to. You better get it out, best to get it out of the way early so you don't waste a bunch of time. And the other thing, we act for the big guys sometimes. It's not particularly rewarding. Sometimes it is, but we're on the other end of that where we're saying they're just a little guy. They can't do this. They can't enforce that. I've practiced for almost 35 years, and I've never had a client that sued a big guy because he got screwed. Why? They can't afford to. They can't afford to. So you're never going to sue. Like when you saw that movie with what's his name, who got ripped off with his windshield wiper technology. That's not every day, and you saw what it did to him. So really, you just have to do your best. If you can get a good contract, well, it does at least give you the option to sue. And if it's a really good contract, maybe you can get your lawsuit funded. That's a new thing that they didn't used to have back in the day. But if you have a good claim, you can. There are companies out there that finance those kind of claims. But again, that's the best approach is getting your stuff together at the beginning, being careful, having several partners that you can negotiate one against the other and put yourself in the best position to negotiate a good deal.
Thanks, John and Ashton. Really appreciate it. That was a very good layout of all the different options available for kind of that early to mid-stage company. So that was really good. And you kind of alluded to it a bit in like each example of some of the risks of kind of only putting eggs in one basket, as you mentioned. But what are some of the considerations, either operationally or even sales strategy, risk or potential, like things that you can get across of exploring multiple different options at once? Because especially in that early to mid stage, you might not know what's going to land in the market at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. You had a few examples of a few companies that tried something and it didn't quite work, but then you kind of have to start from scratch. And so what would be your advice for companies to kind of slowly put their toes in multiple different areas, but not take on as much risk as possible?
Yeah, so that's the yin and the yang of it, is because it takes time to put your toes in multiple areas, and you only have so much time, and you want to try and focus as much as you can, but you can't be so focused on one opportunity that you leave others behind. And I don't get it wrong, I think these guys are the guys, right? And I'm speaking the language when I'm up here using these terms and the way I'm talking, because that's how our clients talk. When they say, "I think these guys are the guys," that's how they say it, and they believe it. And just too often it's not. So we found from experience, again, what I said is you need more people at the table. And I've got just tons of examples of where that has been a benefit, and we've gotten a better deal at it. But there's no guarantee, even in that situation. You can have more people at the table, and you pick one, you pick the best of the bunch, and they still don't deliver, right? So, but yeah, I think just be diligent about assessing up front your bandwidth, and then identifying your top potential alternatives for whatever path it is that you're going down, and then prioritize them. And you have to use your gut to some extent, and just get enough of them at the table. If you're talking about engaging with someone on a contractual basis or something like that, it makes them more honest, because and not only will you get a better deal, but it speeds up the process. Fear of loss is the biggest motivator for most companies and most people. They'll drag their feet for years if they have the ability to do that. If you don't have any other options, you bring a couple of other parties to the table, you can compress your timeline like you wouldn't believe. But I've seen the big guys drag you out 5 to 10 years. 5 to 10 years. I mean, who's got that time? And I've seen clients actually sit it out, and they have no money. I see smiling faces again. They're just dragging. They're just subsisting for 5 or 10 years while they're hoping this deal comes. And then, even if it does, there's 10 years of your life in misery. But again, most times it doesn't. And in that 10 years, the partner that you're working with is often just learning as much about your technology as they can, and you're spoon feeding them in hopes that it comes together and nothing happens at the end of the day. So, guys, I'm not trying to sound negative. This is not me. I am the most optimistic guy, to my detriment, that you're ever going to meet. But I have my own experience and my clients' experience that it does sober you up a little bit. So I'm just the biggest thing we can do, I always say, is we can't tell you what to do, but we can help tell you what not to do, and that will hopefully give you a fighting chance of making it as you go down the road. Are we out of time? Do we have time for one? Would anyone else like to ask a question? If you do, you can ask it after, when we're having a drink or a snack or something like that. So thank you all very much, and I'll introduce who's coming from CRIN. Is it you, Ann, or Amber? Here's Amber. Amber and Ann are the reasons that this all comes together as well as it does.
Thanks, John. All right. I am the only thing standing between you and a glass of wine, so I'm aware of that, and I will be fast. So I'm Amber. I get to be responsible for stakeholder engagement at CRIN, which means connecting with you and finding out what provides the most value for you. So as a quick overview, because I think it's familiar to many in this room, CRIN is a pan-Canadian federally funded organization that exists to help clean technologies get to commercialization, adopted, and exported. And so we have received $110 million from the Government of Canada, so thank you for paying your taxes. And with that includes $10 million of bridge funding, because they were so happy with how we deployed the first $100 million. We have successfully funded 66 projects. 41 of those are late stage, and most of those are near or at commercialization. Our secret sauce is that those technologies have an industry partner that have piloted the project as well as put some money into it. So we find that combination really helps them get across the finish line. So we just closed our last competition that we're in the process of judging right now. We'll be announcing that in May. And that's for $12 million. And we are in the process of working with the Government of Canada for another larger injection of funds, because they like the work that we help you do. We represent 5 sectors. So really anybody that has anything to do with the oil and gas industry has a seat at the table, and really any of the other industries that are connected. There's lots of the clean technology solutions that work across industry, from agriculture to mining and fuels and so forth. So funders, that includes public, private, adopters, which includes the end user, innovators, which are those with the brilliant ideas, support services, which would be groups like John and his team, and talent development, recognizing that there is a massive talent gap that exists in this industry. And so working with various different groups to try and change the attitude that youth have around the energy industry and get hopeful about the opportunities that exist there. And we represent 7 themes. These 7 technology themes were identified when we were setting CRIN up. We worked with the adopters to understand what areas they have the greatest challenges in so that we could represent those and help them find solutions. We currently have 4,900 members across Canada and globally. We are free to join, very low barrier to entry. And I'll just show you the next slide, if we can. This gives a very, very small overview of how we are really a network of networks. Our commitment is to not compete or duplicate or replicate anything that exists. It's to find out what's there, bring it out of that silo, and let you know about it. And we work, as it says, this kind of represents the 5 sectors from support services, industry associations, incubators, and so forth, academia. And so we are well represented, and we provide an opportunity for these groups to have a voice where they may not otherwise have it. And then the last slide is just some of the benefits of joining CRIN. We have this member directory, so once you're logged in, you can access those members. You can see what sector they're a part of. You're able to access something called the Oil and Gas Ecosystem Map, which was developed in conjunction with Global Advantage in Ottawa. We're releasing the 2026 edition on Monday. And this is a fantastic data set and resource for you to be able to access everything from funding opportunities to research and beyond by accessing it through the Power BI dashboard on the website. And then we also have something called Innovation Central, which is it's in a very rudimentary form right now. We're working on building that out, but it is an opportunity for innovators to post what your technology is. It doesn't matter what level of technology readiness it is, and then put on there what solution, like what the problem is that it solves and what you're looking for. And then we have our events calendar. So we partner with a lot of groups so that we can help get their messages across. And we always make it hybrid and recorded when possible so that we can make it available to all of our members across Canada. And I have an exciting offer. Now, John inspired me, actually. So, Clean O2. Apparently, these are very hard to come by now with this branding. So, the soap that you heard about with that company, if you become a CRIN member today, or if you can show me that you are one, then you can have a bar of the Clean O2 soap. Don't eat it. And it is actually a fantastic product, and it was a local company. We were happy to partner with them. So come and see me if you want to smell like mint. Thank you, everybody.